All right, I am Zach Van Norman with Once Upon a Fan here with Jane Espenson and Brad Bell of Husbands. First of all, congratulations on season 3 going to the CW seed in August. That's awesome.
Thank you, yeah.
So Husbands, it's a great series, honestly. It's hilarious. It feels very fluid, like it's part of a natural conversation as far as the comedy goes. It's just very quick and like something I would have a conversation with my friends. Just very quick-witted.
Nice.
It also has to be very short because of the length of the episode and how much time you have to fit in the story. And how do you include so much content in such a short time frame?
Well, it's not any different than it would be in a television show, and that was part of why we made it, is because it's all television. It doesn't matter, what box it's coming in. It's all television. So an episode of Husbands is the same as an act break in a traditional sitcom. So the first 8 minutes of Husbands is the same you would see the first 8 minutes before a commercial break on broadcast.
Yeah.
It's written the same way.
Our stories are about 22 minutes long, just like on broadcast. It just because you see it a bit at a time. It looks structurally different, but it's actually structurally the same.
I definitely think that the turns and the joke density are a lot more condensed, maybe than other half hours.
But that's just our writing style.
That's just our writing style. That's just to keep it popping and fresh.
Which I think works because it's just one joke after another.
Yeah.
So, Doma and Prop 8
Right.
resolve on Supreme Court, which would also make the situation on the show much more realistic.
Yeah.
Are we going to see that kind of effect on the storyline at all, or can maybe even mention or come into play, or is that going to be something that's just it's already assumed that that's the case? So
it's already assumed in our world. So what's happening is the world is starting to look like the fictional world that we created in the first place.
Yeah, I think that we have magic powers where when we write things, they come true, because we've done that a few times.
Yeah. Yeah, we made Anderson Cooper come out.
We did. and we're the reason that Barack Obama came out in support of gay marriage.
We're pretty sure that was us.
Yeah.
And all those
I'm
athletes.
certain. I feel like it's basically proof.
Okay.
We have timestamps. All the athletes that are coming out.
Yeah, that was us.
That was us.
Yeah.
Thank you for all of that. So help increase more cultural exposure. Yes, thank you. The episode in the first season where they're discussing Brady's difficulties with coming out recently compared to Cheek's entire life of doing with the same.
Right.
That also seems very familiar. Like I've had that conversation with several people as well. What is your take on things like Doma and Prop 8 being resolved, shows like Husbands and other things, kind of changing people's views and the way that our culture is kind of going in that direction?
Yeah, I definitely think that it does change perception. I think that knowing gay people, either literally in real life or being able to feel like you know them because you can relate to them through what you see. One of my favorite examples to use is the Golden Girls, because what do you have in common with 4 women in their 60s? I don't know. And then you watch the Golden Girls and you realize that those stories and those relationships are just about the human experience, and they're universal. And I feel like that is what we strive for on our show. They are specific stories, but the heart of them is something that I think every human being can relate to.
I'm really glad you brought up the Golden Girls, actually, because there's an episode of that show where
gay marriages,
gay marriages,
absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah.
We've watched those episodes together. We thought a lot about what that show accomplished, the way it did it, the things she was saying. Like, that show was quite important to us.
That show is very ahead of its time, absolutely.
Yeah, I would agree, especially with the relationship between her brother and his partner. He was a cop. It's so different from, especially what we would see now with common stereotypes of gay people. Did that come into play? Like, when you say we're watching that, did that kind of relationship come into play?
Well, we've got complicated thoughts about stereotypes and why they're supposed to be bad.
Yeah.
That I will let Brad feel.
That did not come into play, no. I had forgotten that episode, actually. The particular episode I remember is them saying she was a lesbian, and Blanche says, well, so what? Isn't Danny Thomas one?
Yeah.
And they say that's Lebanese, and she goes, oh, lesbian. And then we see Blanche, get slowly more comfortable with the idea that her roommate or her sister,
her niece or her daughter?
Somebody in Blanche's life is a lesbian. I can't remember.
But yeah, but you sent me the link to the one about the marriage where Dorothy was asking Blanche, like, why did you get married? And she
Right.
says, oh, for all these wonderful reasons. And then said, well, your brother has those same reasons.
Yeah.
And it was really, really beautifully done.
Yeah. Well, I think that, and as far as stereotypes go, part of what we want to say with the show is stereotypes are not bad. Stereotypes are not intrinsically bad. A stereotype like, oh, that minority must be a criminal. Well, that's bad because being a criminal is a negative thing. Stereotypes like, well, that gay person must love Broadway. People assume I love Broadway, which I don't. But if they assume I do, that's not a bad thing. And if people assume that I'm weak or aloof because I'm feminine, well, that's not really my fault. That's their fault for assuming it and for judging me. So we feel like, stereotypes, there are stereotypes for a reason. And I know people say that to the point that even that's a cliche now. But I think that we want to show as many different diverse combinations of gay that we can, because there are all different kinds, and one is not better than the other. There's not one right way to be gay. So we just try to show that.
Yeah, there's some people objected to the depiction of Cheeks as saying, like, that's a stereotype, instead of acknowledging that Cheeks has a right to exist and be however he wants to be.
Right. And it's interesting because, like, what's the alternative? We seem to get feedback from the gay community saying, like, well, the tall, handsome one is fine, but the other one is, that's just blah, blah, blah. And, like, so are we supposed to show two masculine, homogenized versions of homos? Like,
Gosh, I hope not. That's not what I want to see.
Right, it's not what I want to see either.
No. What finally led you to go into writing, working in theater, I suppose? Was it something you had a knack for from an early age, or was it something that kind of manifested itself over time and you kind of realized I should go with this?
We were both raised as only children and watched a lot of TV, and I certainly think we've probably both internalized a lot of TV writing as something that meant a lot to us as children, just in very different years. And it's the best way to get your point across. An actor doesn't get to choose what they're going to say. Even a producer who tends to wield a lot of the power. Like, it's the writer who puts those words down.
Yeah.
And we're lucky we work in television, in where the writer has the power to also be the producer.
Yeah, absolutely. I did always have a flair for writing, but I had this vision of a writer as sort of an antisocial, revenge-seeking geek, who like got to grow up and make pretty people do things.
Like kind of hunched over a typewriter.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Like, I'm gonna make the pretty girl kiss me now. And I never felt that way, so I never felt like, well, I can't be a writer. You know what I mean? I'm not like. I mean, I am wearing a scarf and drinking tea, but I never thought of myself as a scarf-wearing, tea-drinking, like, tortured artist. And that was in my mind who a writer was. Writing in their journal and smoking and looking at the sunset.
So why'd you start doing it?
Well, I mean, I always did it, but I never... there was this cognitive dissonance where it was like, no, I'm not a writer. Me? No. What you just said was hilarious. I'm going to write that down.
Oh, it's like people who say, I'm not a smoker.
Right.
Did either one of you... Oh, sorry.
Yeah, well, I just, so I guess I felt like I had good ideas and I liked what I was seeing in stories, and I just started putting it down. And when I was talking to Jane about something, I guess the initial script that I was working on, I said something like, yeah, there might be an idea here. Like, I'll send it over to you and you can actually, like, make it a script. And you were like, this is a pretty good script as it is. I was like, well, I'm not a writer. And you were like, you might be a writer. So I just kept writing.
That's right, I forgot that early on. Yeah. I had to tell you were a writer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and now...
And then, I look back and I was like, well, of course I was. Of course. Because, like, friends and family would all say, like, oh, you've always been so funny and so good. And I started thinking about it. I was like, wait, I've been writing and performing my own stuff since, like, 12. So,
yeah, he was a writer.
That's awesome. And then what would you say to writers who are trying to get their content out to the world, either in print or, other forms of media? Any words of wisdom?
There are so many ways to get your writing out there now. point a webcam at yourself and say your words.
Or
write
point
a
it
blog.
at somebody pretty and make them say the words.
Yeah.
Say the words, pretty people.
Write a blog, write a journal, take a writing class and show it to your professors. Like just show it to someone. Don't just sit on it. You're only going to get the instruction that will help you get better if you've got it out there being read.
Yeah, and seek that as well, because a lot of times people will show their stuff and people are hesitant to give you honest feedback because you might not be asking for it directly. So I think that you have to say, like, what is your honest opinion?
Yeah.
And if somebody gives you their honest opinion, even
Listen.
if you don't like it, or you think they're wrong, or you think they're dumb, or whatever, go, okay, thank you for your honest opinion. Then if you want to go home and throw it in the trash and curse them, that you could do that. But it is generally better to listen, particularly if you hear the same thing.
For more than one person, absolutely.
Jane Espenson and Brad Bell, thank you very much for your time today. I appreciate it.
Yeah.